Good morning, students. Say your prayer. Yeah, thank you. நான் ஒரு நல்ல ஆசிரியர். நான் உங்களுக்கு தாயாகவும் தந்தையாகவும் இருந்து முறையாக அன்போடு கல்வியை போதிப்பேன். நான் ஒரு நல்ல ஆசிரியர். நான் உங்களுக்கு தாயாகவும் தந்தையாகவும் இருந்து முறையாக அன்போடு கல்வியை போதிப்பேன். நான் ஒரு நல்ல ஆசிரியர். நான் உங்களுக்கு தாயாகவும் தந்தையாகவும் இருந்து முறையாக அன்போடு கல்வியை போதிப்பேன். Okay, students, take your social science book and come to page number 40. So today's class we will discuss about VELLORE revolt. So the first revolt by the soldiers of British Indian Army against the company rule. Okay, so VELLORE, which was a town in north of Tamil Nadu. So VELLORE, so now it was a separate district. Okay, so in VELLORE there was a fort. It was built during the Nayak kingdom period. Okay, so in that VELLORE, so the soldiers of British Indian Army revolted against their higher officials, and this was recorded as the prelude. That is, so just a trial for the great revolt of 1857. Okay, so in today's class we will discuss about the VELLORE revolt. So how the revolt broke out. So first the causes for the revolt, then the immediate cause. So which event considers the immediate cause for the VELLORE revolt, then course of the revolt, so how it happened, then the suppression of the revolt, so how the British suppressed the revolt, then we will discuss about the effects of the VELLORE revolt, so the result, so what were the effects of the VELLORE revolt, then finally the causes for the failure of the revolt, so what are the fact, so that causes the failure of the revolt. So in our previous class we discussed about Velanachiyar, then Marudupandiyas, then Dhiran Chinnamalai. So Velanachiyar, so she was the queen of Sivagangai. She was married to Muthuvarganadhar, the Raja of Sivagangai. In 1772, so the Nawab of Arcot and the company so attacked Sivagangai and defeated Muthuvarganadhar. So Velanachiyar escaped along with her daughter, and she lived under the protection of Gopal Nayak of Dindigul. Later she formed an army and defeated the English troops, and she recaptured Sivagangai with the help of Marudu brothers. So Velanachiyar, she was the first woman to rise against the British power in India. Then we discussed about Marudu brothers, so Periya Marudu and Chinna Marudu. So they were initially working under Muthuvarganadhar of Sivagangai. So when was the conflict broke between Marudupandiyars and English? When Marudupandiyan gave shelter to the brothers of Kattapamman, Somathurai and Sabathaiya. So there the conflict broke out. So then we discussed about the South Indian Rebellion. So the confederacy formed by Marudupandiyans, so Marudu brothers. So they formed a confederacy along with Gopal Nayak of Dindigul, Kerala Varma, like that. Then we discussed about the Tiruchirappalli proclamation, so which was issued in the year 1801. So the first proclamation issued by a Indian king to unite Indians so against the company rule. Then we discussed how the English annexed Sivagangai. So how English annexed Sivagangai? So because the Palaikara troops were not well trained, and they lack modern facilities, and also the rulers, so the Palaikaras, so they were not able general as like that of the company soldiers. So that's why they were easily defeated. Then we discussed about Dhiran Chinnamalai. So Dhiran Chinnamalai, so he is from our native. So he is from Chennimalai. So his original name was Tirthagiri. So initially he fought against the company along with the Congo country soldiers. So initially he tried to get the soldiers from Tipu Sultan and also from Marathas, but he could not get. But he faced the British and defeated them at several battles. But finally he was caught and hanged to death in Sangagiri fort. So this only we have discussed in our previous class. So we discussed about Velanachiyar, Marudu brothers and Dhiran Chinnamalai. So today we will discuss about VELLORE revolt, so which took place in the year 1806. So the family members of Tipu were imprisoned at VELLORE fort after the 4th Mysore war. So the Tipu Sultan, so the ruler of Mysore. So he was defeated in the 4th Anglo-Mysore War. So he was defeated and killed in 4th Anglo-Mysore War. So after that war, his family members were imprisoned at Vellore Fort. Then, so some 3,000 ex-servant and soldiers of Hyder and Tipu had also been moved to vicinity of Vellore. So not only the family members of Tipu Sultan, but also his ex-servant, so the former servant and the soldiers of Hyder Ali. So who was Hyder Ali? So he was the father of Tipu Sultan. So some 3,000 ex-servant and soldiers of both Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan, they also been moved to vicinity. So vicinity means area around a particular place. So the soldiers and the servants of Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan also been moved to Vellore. And their property in Mysore. So what happened to their property in Mysore? It was confiscated. So confiscated means to officially take something away from somebody as a punishment. So their property was taken by the British company, so as a punishment. So it was quite natural that they were all unhappy and they hated the English. So since the soldiers and ex-servants of Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan and the family members of Tipu Sultan were imprisoned at Vellore. So they were moved away from Mysore, and also their property was confiscated. So that's why, so the family members of Tipu Sultan and also the servant and the soldiers, so they were all unhappy and they hated the English. So the Vellore fort now consisted of a large majority of Indian troops. A good part of it recently been raised in Tirunelveli after the Palayakarar uprising of 1800. So the Vellore fort, so it consists of more number of Indian troops. So most of them, so mostly added after the suppression of the Palayakarar. So the Palayakarar, so after defeated, what happened to the soldiers? So the most of the soldiers, so they were added to the English company army. So they were placed in Vellore fort. So many of the trained soldiers of the various palayams were admitted to the English army. So many of the trained soldiers, so after their defeat, after Palayakarar war, so they were now admitted into the English army. So thus the Vellore fort became the meeting ground of the rebel forces of South India. So the Vellore fort became the meeting ground of the rebel forces of South India. So because the soldiers from various palayam were now admitted into the English army. Now the English army is placed in Vellore. So thus the Vellore fort became the meeting ground of the forces of South India. So the Vellore fort consists of large majority of Indian troops. A good part of it recently had been added, so recently raised in Tirunelveli after the Palayakarar uprising of 1800. So many soldiers of the various palayams were now admitted into the English army. So thus the Vellore fort became the meeting ground of the rebel forces of South India. So already many soldiers from Tirunelveli, that is from Palayam, and also so the Mysore soldiers. So the soldiers of Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan, so they were also kept in Vellore, in and around the city of Vellore. So that's why, so Vellore now became the meeting ground of the rebel forces of South India. In 1803, William Cavendish Bentinck. So in 1803, William Cavendish Bentinck. So William Bentinck. So he became the governor of Madras. In 1803, William Bentinck became the governor of Madras. So during his period, certain military regulations were introduced in 1805 and 1806. So during the period of William Bentinck, so who was the governor of Madras, several military regulations, so several military rules were introduced in the year 1805 to 1806, and these were enforced, and these were made into effect by the Madras Commander-in-Chief Sir John Cradock. So in 1803, so Lord William Bentinck, so he became the governor of Madras. So during his period, so several military regulations were introduced in the year 1805 to 1806. So and these military regulations were put into force by the Madras Commander-in-Chief Sir John Cradock. But the Sepoys felt that these were designed to insult to them. So but the Sepoys of the British Indian Army thought that these regulations were to insult the soldiers only. So what were the regulations introduced? So there are a lot of regulations. So first, so they were the causes for the revolt. So first, the strict discipline, new weapons, new methods, and uniform were all new to the Sipais. So first, the strict discipline. So the English, so they were strict. So they follow strict discipline. Then they introduced new weapons. So they introduced the modern new weapons and new method. Okay, so the new method of fighting, and also uniform. So they provide uniform to the soldiers. So these things were new to the Indian Sipais. And the Sipais were asked to shave the beard and to trim the mustache. So the Sipais were asked to shave the beard and to trim the mustache. So beard, do you know? Yeah, mustache. Yeah. So beard in Tamil. Yeah, dadi. Mustache. Yeah, misai. Okay, so the Sipais were asked to shave the beard and to trim the mustache. Then the wearing of religious mark on the forehead and the use of earrings were also banned. So the Sipais were asked to shave the beard and to trim the mustache, and apart from that, so they banned the marking of religious idea. So the marking of religious mark. Okay, so the wearing of religious mark on the forehead and the use of earrings were also banned. Then the English treated the Indian Sipais as their inferior. So as inferior means, so they won't give enough respect to the Indian soldiers. So the English did not give the enough respect to the Indian soldiers. So they thought the English were superior and the Indians were inferior. So there was the racial prejudice, so racial discrimination. So they treated Indians as racially backward. So they considered, so the English considered, so the white people were high in class, so high in society or high in world. But the Indians were poor. So the Indians were racially avoided. Okay. So the causes for the revolt. So first, the strict discipline, new weapons, new methods, and uniforms were all new to the Sipais. The Sipais were asked to shave the beard and to trim the mustache. The wearing of religious mark on the forehead and the use of earrings were also banned. The English treated the Indian Sipais as their inferior, and there was the racial prejudice. So prejudice means an unreasonable dislike or preference for a person, group, custom, etc., especially when it is based on their race, religion, sex, etc. Okay, so prejudice means an unreasonable dislike. So it is not reasonable. Okay, so these are the causes for the revolt. Then what is the immediate cause of the revolt? So in June 1806, Military General Agnew introduced a new turban. So turban, so which wear as like a hat in the head. So long piece of cloth wound tightly around the head. So in June 1806, Military General Agnew introduced a new turban resembling a European hat with a badge of cross on it. So in June 1806, Military General Agnew introduced a new turban. It resembles like an European hat with a badge of cross on it. So cross, so the Christian symbol. So cross. It was popularly known as Agnew's turban. Yes, it was popularly known as Agnew's turban. So both the Hindu and the Muslim soldiers opposed it. So both the Hindu and the Muslim soldiers opposed it because they thought that the turban, so introduced by Agnew, resembles that they were trying to convert the soldiers into Christianity. Okay, so because the hat. So the turban, so which look like a European hat with a badge of cross on it. So it resembles the symbol of Christianity. So both the Hindu and the Muslim soldiers opposed it. The soldiers who opposed to wear the turban were severely punished by the English. So the soldiers who refused to wear the turban were severely punished by the English. Okay, in June 1806, Military General Agnew introduced a new turban resembling a European hat with a badge of cross on it. So this was popularly known as Agnew's turban. Both the Hindu and the Muslim soldiers opposed it. So the soldiers were severely punished by the English. Then course of the revolt. So the Indian soldiers, so they were waiting for an opportunity to attack the English officers. So the Indian soldiers were waiting for an opportunity to attack the English officers. So Tipu's families also took part in. So Tipu's family, so they also took part in the revolt. So Fateh Haidar, so who was the elder son of Tippu, tried to form an alliance against the English. So Fateh Haidar, so he was the eldest son of Tippu Sultan. So he tried to form an alliance against the English. On July 10th in the early morning, the native Sipahi's of the 1st and 23rd Regiment started the revolt. So on 10th July 1806 in the early morning, the native Sipahi's of the 1st and 23rd Regiment. So then Sipahis were divided. So the Sipahis were formed as an regiment. So there are several regiments. So each regiment consists of a particular number of soldiers. Okay, so the native Sipahis of the 1st and 23rd Regiment started the revolt. So Colonel Fancourt, so who commanded the garrison. So garrison means a group of soldiers living and protecting a city or fort. So Colonel Fancourt, who commanded a garrison, was their first victim. So that means, so he was first killed by the Sipahis. The fort gates were closed. So the gate of the fort, Vellore fort, was closed. Meantime, the rebels proclaimed Fateh Haidar as their new ruler. So on 10th July 1806, in the early morning, the native Sipahis of the 1st and 23rd Regiments started the revolt. So Colonel Fancourt, who commanded the garrison, was their first victim. So the fort gates were closed. Now the rebels proclaimed Fateh Haidar as their new ruler. So the British flag in the fort was brought down, and the tiger-striped flag of Tippu Sultan was hoisted on the fort of Vellore. So the British flag in the Vellore fort was brought down, and they now hoisted the flag of Tippu Sultan. So Tippu Sultan flag so consists of tiger. So tiger-striped flag. Okay, so Vellore revolt. So the causes first. So the strict disciplines. So the new military regulations introduced by the British was not liked by the Indian Sipahis. And they were banned to wear the religious mark on their forehead, and also the use of earrings. And also the English treated the Indian Sipahis as their inferior. The main cause is the introduction of Agnew turban. So it resembles European hat with a badge of cross on it. So whenever the Indian Sipahis refused to wear that hat means they were severely punished. So the Indian Sipahis were waiting for their opportunity to attack the English officers. So Tippu family also participated in it. So on 10th July 1806, in the early morning, the native Sipahis of the 1st and 23rd Regiment of Vellore Fort started the revolt. So Colonel Fancourt, so who commanded the garrison, was their first victim. So he was killed first. Then, so they proclaimed Fateh Haidar, the eldest son of Tippu Sultan, as their ruler. So they brought down the British flag in the fort, and they hoisted the tiger-striped flag of Tippu Sultan. Suppression of the revolt. So how the revolt was suppressed? Major Coates. So he was outside the fort. He rushed to Ranipete and informed Colonel Gillespie. So Major Coates, so who was outside the fort. So because already, so the gate of the fort was closed. So the fort gates were closed. So Major Coates, so who was outside the Vellore fort, he rushed to Ranipete and informed Colonel Gillespie. So Colonel Gillespie reached the Vellore fort. So he made an attack on the rebel force. So Colonel Gillespie, so who was in Ranipete, returned to Vellore fort, and he made an attack to the rebel force. The revolt was completely suppressed and failed. So the revolt was completely suppressed and failed. So peace was again restored in Vellore. So peace was again restored in Vellore. On the whole, 113 Europeans and about 350 Sipahis were killed in the uprising. So on the whole, so 113 Europeans and about 350 Indian Sipahis were killed in the uprising. The revolt was suppressed within a short period. So within a short period. So it didn't take much time. So the revolt was suppressed within a short period, but it was one of the significant event in the history of Tamil Nadu. So it was one of the important event in the history of Tamil Nadu. So after the Palaikarar War, so it was the important event. So Major Coates, so who was outside the fort, rushed to Ranipet, and he informed Colonel Gillespie. So Colonel Gillespie reached the Vellore fort, he attacked the rebel forces. So the revolt was completely suppressed and failed. So peace was again restored in Vellore. On the whole, 113 Europeans and about 350 Sipahis were killed in the uprising. So the revolt was suppressed within a short period, and it was one of the significant events in the history of Tamil Nadu. Then what were the effect of Vellore revolt? So the new method and uniform regulations were withdrawn. So the new method. So the new Agni turban, so the new methods were withdrawn, and also the uniform regulations also withdrawn. The family of Tipu, as a precautionary measure, was sent to Calcutta. So the family of Tipu, so who has been imprisoned in Vellore. So initially they were in Mysore. So after the fourth Anglo-Mysore war, so Tipu's family were now imprisoned in Vellore Fort now. So they were also responsible for the revolt. So as a precautionary, so precautionary means so something that is done in advance in order to prevent a problem or to avoid danger. So the family of Tipu, as a precautionary measure, was sent to Calcutta. So now they were sent to Calcutta. So William Cavendish Bentinck was removed from his service. William Bentinck was now removed from his service. So he was removed from the posting of governor of Madras. So the effects of Vellore revolt: the first, the new methods and the uniform regulations were withdrawn. So they were withdrawn. So they were taken away. Now the family of Tipu Sultan, as a precautionary measure, was sent to Calcutta. So they were now sent to Calcutta, so which is in Bengal province. Then William Cavendish Bentinck, so he was removed from his service. So he was removed from the posting of governor of Madras. So these were the effect of Vellore revolt. Then causes for the failure of the revolt. So why the revolt failure? So first, there was no proper leadership to guide the soldiers properly. So there was no proper leadership to guide the soldiers properly. So you know Fateh Haidar. So he was son of Tipu Sultan. But he was not able ruler or able general as like his father Tipu Sultan or like his grandfather Hyder Ali. So there was no proper leadership to guide the soldiers properly. Then the rebellion was not well organized. So the rebellion was not well organized. So just they wanted to attack their English officer and to independent their country, so independent their native. So that is the Vellore, so Mysore Sultan. So the rebellion was not well organized. Then divide and rule policy of the English split the unity of the Indians. So the English so followed the policy of divide and rule. So so because so most of the British army, so British Indian army consists of the Indian soldiers only. So Colonel Gillespie, so he only suppressed the revolt. So how can he suppress the revolt? So his army consists of Indian soldiers also. So the divide and rule policy of the English split the unity of the Indians. So the causes for the failure of the revolt: first, there was no proper leadership to guide the soldiers properly. Then the rebellion was not well organized. So the rebellion was not well organized. Then divide and rule policy of the English split the unity of the Indians. So V.D. Savarkar, so he was one of the freedom fighter. So he calls the Vellore revolt of 1806 as the prelude. So prelude means an event or action that happens before another more important event. So an introduction. But it was an introduction to the first war of Indian independence in 1857. So Vellore revolt took place only in Vellore. But if you take the Great Revolt, so the first war of Indian independence, it took place in almost in entire North India. So we will discuss about the revolt of 1857 in our next class. So V.D. Savarkar, he calls the Vellore revolt of 1806 as the prelude. So an event so which took place before an important event. So he considered that the Vellore revolt of 1806 as the prelude to the first war of Indian independence in 1857. Okay students, so today's class we discussed about Vellore revolt which took place in the year 1806. So we discussed about the causes for the revolt, then the immediate cause, then course of the revolt, then how it was suppressed, then the effect of the Vellore revolt, finally about the causes for the failure of the revolt. So Vellore revolt, so Vellore which was a fort, so Vellore which was a city located in north of Tamil Nadu. So there was a fort, so in that fort only, so the family members of Tipu Sultan so were imprisoned. So after the death of Tipu Sultan in Anglo-Mysore war, the family members were imprisoned in Vellore fort. And also the ex-servicemen and the other soldiers and the soldiers of Mysore. So they were also imprisoned in Vellore. So the strict regulations introduced by the British, the company, And also the immediate cause, so the introduction of Agni turban, so which resembles European hat, yeah, so was not liked by the Indian soldiers. So whenever they oppose means, so they were severely punished, yeah, so they were waiting for a chance. So suddenly one day, so that is on 10th July 1806, so they attacked the English officers and they killed them, yeah. So and they declared Fateh Hyder as their leader, so Fateh Hyder as the leader of the Vellore fort, and they hoisted the Tipu Sultan flag in Vellore fort, okay va. But the revolt was suppressed by Colonel Gillespie, so who was in Ranipet, so Major Coates, so who was outside the fort, so informed the revolt, so informed about the rebellion to Colonel Gillespie. So Colonel Gillespie suppressed the revolt. So on total 113 Europeans and 350 Indian civilians were killed. Yeah, so the revolt was thus suppressed. Yeah. So but after the revolt, the new methods of and uniforms regulations were withdrawn. Yeah, so the Tipu Sultan family was now sent to Calcutta. Okay, William Bendick, so also removed from service. Yeah. Then we discussed the causes of the failure. Why means there was no proper leadership, yeah, and it was not properly organized. Yeah. And the English followed the policy of divide and rule. Yeah, so it divided the Indians. Yeah, so it split the unity of Indians. Okay, so these things only we have discussed. Yeah. So Vellore revolt. So after that, there is no that much opposition against the British in Tamil Nadu. Okay, so till the beginning of 20th century, so there is no much opposition against the British. Okay, so starting from the Palaikarar War, ending with the Vellore revolt, so there was no much opposition against the British. Yeah, so after Vellore revolt, there was no much opposition against the British, the company rule in Tamil Nadu. Okay, okay students, so take your book. Yeah, take page number 40. Textbook reading. So read today's topic fully. So Vellore revolt as your textbook reading. Then homework. Take page number 46. Yeah, 6th kilometer, 5th question. Bring out the effects of the Vellore revolt. So take page number 41. So the first heading, effects of the Vellore revolt. So the 3-point answer for 5th question. So bring out the effects of the Vellore revolt. So the review methods and uniform regulations were withdrawn. The family of Tipu as a precautionary measures was sent to Calcutta. William Cavendish Bendick was removed from his service. So this is the answer for 5th question. Okay, so write it in your homework note and read it well. So thank you.